How to love yourself. 5 powerful steps. Let's go. Step number 1, learn how to handle your inner critic. Learn how to handle, AKA relax, your inner critic. So we all have an inner critic. You may use different language. You may say that you talk to yourself badly, that you're hard on yourself. You may not even recognize currently. In fact, many of you listening to this right now will not recognize currently just quite how hard you are on yourself, because it may be so unconscious, habitual. It may have been modeled to you in your childhood. Many parents leave a strong imprint on their children through their inner critics, because it is the structure, it's the internalized voice of parents and culture. And it's an important developmental achievement. Right? What do I mean by that? It means it's important that you developed an inner critic. It's what has allowed you to function as a member of a society, of a culture, of a family, right? Don't do that. Don't cross the road. You might get run over. Don't touch that. It's hot. Don't think about money in that way. Don't stand out in this way. There's a lot of do nots that are important for you to internalize so that you know what the rules and norms and ways of being that are appropriate in your family of origin, in your schooling, and in your community, or even the culture at large, right? So the inner critic is a necessary development. But then what got you here won't get you there, right? Just in the same way that when you get to higher levels of science and education, they say, you know what, that thing that we taught you when you were 12, it's not quite true, right? We simplified things. In the same way, the inner critic that got you to a certain stage of your development, we'll call it socialized self, isn't going to get you to the next stage of your development, which we're going to call authentic self. So for you to be more self-loving, also for you to be more authentic, you're going to have to relax this straitjacket, this set of restrictions that have been placed on you, because they may not be true to the authentic you that is now looking to come online. So how do you relax your inner critic? All right, partly you do it through self-observation. I often have clients take a moment once a day and just reflect, how have you been talking to yourself? And if you had the opportunity to redo that, right, imagine that you were talking to someone else, a friend, someone that you love, someone that you care about. How could you say that in a more kind and considerate way? You don't right now have to believe the new way that you're talking. You just need to start practicing it. And through time, you might notice that things that maybe sounded a bit unrealistic or cringy to you, through time, they may become more acceptable to you, and they may actually feel like a more real way of talking to yourself. Here's where the inner critic is gnarly, is that it often is picking up on things that are partially true and saying them to you in a critical way. Right? When your inner critic says, oh, you loser, you're always late, it's possibly true that you have a habit to run late. You may even currently run late often and or always. You can take that same bit of information and you can phrase it in a different way. You can say, hey, today the transport system didn't run great. You were late. How about next time we leave 15 minutes of buffer? Or, hey, that traffic jam's unprecedented. There's nothing that you could really do about it. It happens, right? If that traffic jam hadn't been there, maybe you would have been on time. And I'm using this because this was probably one of the places that my inner critic historically, certainly in my 20s, used to run rings around me, right? I wasn't always punctual. I would tend to take on too many things, and I would tend to be really hard to myself about that. Now, one of the reasons you may think, well, look, if I relax that, I'm going to get worse, right? Because I'm already super late. Now, if I tell myself, don't worry that you're late, maybe I'm going to get worse. Just run this as an experiment. Find out for yourself. Part of relaxing your inner critic and being more self-loving is actually, it's a form of self-honesty. It's actually that you give a more whole view of reality. That's why I'm saying your inner critic often takes partial truths. They're not the whole truth. And this, by the way, this ability to distinguish partial from whole truths is really jet fuel to your development. So this is a serious point. This will serve you in other domains of your development. So you can take a partial truth like, hey, you have a habit of running late, buddy. How can you and I do something differently about that, right? And what you might even do is you might start to make different agreements with people, right? You might say, hey, I'll see you there at 6:45 plus or minus 15, right? This is a way of building in some buffer zone for you, right? So that might be one way that you can approach it. Another way that you can approach it is to learn how to be less committed, right? And this is just on the specific instance of punctuality. You might be super punctual, but your inner critic may run rings around you in some other territory. The point is to learn to speak to yourself both truthfully and kindly. If you only use the sledgehammer of truth and fear, which is the tendency of the inner critic, not only does it leave you with less self-acceptance, but it's also not encouraging you in the direction that you want to grow. right? You know yourself. Some people do grow by having hard talk, kind of like Navy SEAL Marine style. But even the toughest Navy SEAL often is going to have a lack of self-love at the core of their life. And so what I'm talking about today will apply to them just as much as it might apply to you, even if you're in much less externally self-critical environments. All right, what's the second thing that you can do in order to love yourself more? You can start spending high quality time with yourself. The second way to love yourself more is to spend more high quality time with yourself. So what do we mean by that? We mean, how can you drop in with yourself and tune in with yourself, right? So I'm a coach, so this might sound like coach speak to you, but I just want you to keep an open mind here. Right? When you really love and care about something, right? Whether it's you support the Eagles, whether it's you love soccer, whether it's that you love nature, you're likely to spend some high quality attention there, right? You watch the game, you track your team. If you love nature, you go spend some time out in nature. If you said to me, I really love nature, and I was like, oh, where's your favorite nature spot? And you had zero idea about any nature spots that you loved, I might get curious, do you really love nature? So in order for you to love yourself, might it not follow that you might need to spend some time attending to yourself? So I'm not saying this is Netflix time. This is high quality time. This is, the key word here is presence. This is where you are present and attentive to yourself. Some people find they can do this when they put on music, particularly music that relaxes them and calms their nervous system. Some people find they can do this by hitting their journal, right? And metabolizing their life, digesting what's actually happening in their life, like a high quality conversation with themselves. Some people find they can do this by getting into nature, right? Really tuning out the rest of the world and getting close to yourself. I'm agnostic as to what works for you. What I want is for you to find something that is practical and achievable within your schedule and your life, so that you can start to spend more high quality time with yourself. If you can just spend 30 minutes walking around your neighborhood and that has you get more connected to what is actually happening to you, if you can go spend a little bit more time in the park, if you get better at putting on AirPods, tuning the rest of the world out and just going internal. Some people find body work or massage or swimming, yoga. There's lots of things. Try some things to see what actually has you get more connected to yourself. And the spirit here is really we want to be in a good conversation with ourselves. And you'll know this if you've ever been on a dating app and you've matched with someone and you're asking questions and you're not getting any questions back. And part of you thinks, geez, does this person not know how to have a conversation? If you've had that kind of experience, use that to influence how you are with yourself, right? So we want you to have a high quality conversation with self, which means partly that you're going to ask better questions. How are you doing? What do you need? What's in your life currently that's not working for you? What are you currently saying yes to that you actually are a no or maybe to? Where do you need to simplify your life? How can you bring your essence more forward? It's not about asking these questions specifically. These are the kinds of questions, right? Notice these questions have an openness, they have a curiosity, and they have a care towards yourself. That's what we're going for. If it's hard for you to do that, let's say if you go for a walk, you're going to be tuned into the birds and the breeze, right? You're maybe a very sensory person. Then get some journal prompts, right? Find some ways that these questions can already be in a format that you can access them when you're not necessarily able to do that easily in the flow or in the moment. If writing a journal doesn't work for you, audio journal, record these things as prompts and then play them to yourself as you walk and speak them out. One of the great things I think, this might be a Jackism, but about the world of AirPods is that I think we get to talk to ourselves out loud in public in ways that before, let's say I used to do, but I used to think it was a little strange. I think there's more social acceptability about that, right? Because who knows, you might be on a call with someone else, you might be recording something, a voice note, so you get to talk to yourself. So some of you talking out loud won't work. You actually need to really just tune in, quieten off, and kind of go inside, and it's a little bit more of a, that slow, still voice of calm, that slow, still voice of your heart, because this is really what we're talking about, right? I had a late mentor who said to me, Jack, and this, when he said this to me, it actually resulted in me leaving the company that I'd founded. Jack, where you put your heart, you put your life, right? So your heart matters. You having a high quality conversation with yourself is you saying, hey, heart, you matter. What are you noticing? What do you care about? What do you need? What's a priority? Your heart is the mechanism of priority in your life, because your heart knows what it cares about. Your head can do all sorts of things, but it's not great at discerning what really matters, because what really matters is a heart question, and your heart has a uniqueness. So what matters to you doesn't need to matter to your neighbor, to your coworker, to your partner, to your family. There's a unique set of things that matter most to you that you don't really even get to choose, by the way. I think it's it's implanted in your heart, or your heart is the thing that's giving you that communication. So step number 2, learn to spend some high quality time with yourself. Number 3, how to love yourself. Number 3 is to create a loving foundation in your life. One of the main ways that I see people not do this is that they create a life which is overly committed. So the way that their life works is sort of on some mix of caffeine and insanity, right? That they are habitually overcommitted. They are always spinning too many plates. They are always rushed. They never really have time and space to digest their life. They don't have time and space to devote to what they most care about. Now, in some ways, it can be a luxury to have time and space to devote more energy to things that you care about, right? You might be overcommitted because you're like, yeah, I've got 3 children, or yeah, I work 3 jobs and I'm still struggling to pay the bills, right? So I'm not in la la land here. What I'm trying to help you to do is move in the direction that would allow you to have a more loving foundation to your life, right? So if, for instance, you do have multiple people, it might be kids, it might be, elderly parents, it might be, friends, families that are placing a lot of demands on you. Let's just be realistic. You have a lot of demands on you, so you may have even more need than, quote, the average person in order to find some time to have this kind of high quality attention, right? Like the Dalai Lama famously said on his most busy days, he prays more, right? Because there's more need for that sort of, centeredness, guidance, calm, whatever it is that he receives during prayer. So if your life is a high demand life, you have an above average need to try to create, pockets of, self-love, self-connection. So for instance, if you look at your calendar, or we could realistically calendar your life and it's pretty full, you might over time want to be in the inquiry, are there any things that I can change my commitment to, right? This is an executive coaching skill, is helping people learn how to renegotiate commitments. And typically those involve both commitments to other people and commitments to yourself, right? So for instance, if your life is really busy with some things that are unlikely to get less busy, like, you're raising children, maybe there's a few other things that have also gotten in there that are negotiable commitments, right? Like maybe you're in some leadership role on a board that actually is great at one level, but it's actually too much for you in this cycle of your life. Or maybe you're taking care of a neighbor doing their shopping, but actually, although that's a nice thing to do, the combination of all your commitments has you overcommitted, right? So the phrase I use with clients is dashboard, like dashboard your life and notice, if we put everything together, and I've done this myself sometimes, and I go, oh, wow, Jack, because I'm looking at this page that's just full of stuff. And by the way, most of it's good stuff. Most of it individually is good stuff. But if you take the overall, the sum of everything in your life and it's too much, you might have to learn how to dial it back. The other way that you can create a loving foundation in your life is look at who do you have in your life, right? There's this classic personal development saying, which is hackneyed but has some partial truth in it, that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend most time with. And sometimes you get to choose that more and sometimes you get to choose that less, right? Sometimes that might be based on choices you made in past. We don't get to choose our families of origin. And at the margins, normally we do have some ability to say, this friend, this coworker, even this, family member, I get to decide not only how much time do I spend with them, but in what context do I spend time with them, right? So you might notice there's a difference between, sitting down and watching the news with a family member and making the decision to go for a cup of coffee with them where you actually sit down and have a more real connection. So part of creating a loving foundation for your life is looking at all your commitments and imagining, if I were in a level of commitment that felt good for me, or I want to move in that direction, do I want to be less or more committed? By the way, some of you might be looking at your life and it's so much blank space that you actually want more in your life. You want more connection, richness, fullness. You want more things that you're responsible for or committed to. So this definitely works in both directions, although it's more typical for me to see clients trying to reduce their commitments. examine that and then look at who are the people that you're really energizing in your life, right? And I always say, this has been my experience in life. I've had times in my life where I've had lots of friends. I've had times in my life where I have not had lots of friends. The value of 1 or 2 authentic friendships, I think, is a big deal, right? So if you're looking at your life right now and you think, well, I don't really have any good friends, even just creating the hope and the intention that you would like to bring 1 or 2 more authentic friendships into your life, I think is an powerful intention. And what it might have you reflect on is, do I need to create space for that, right? So maybe currently I energize this connection and this connection. And let me just get really clear. Why do I do that? Maybe I do that because we went to high school together. Maybe I do that because actually at a previous period of life, we were more intensely connected. But over time, that connection is less real for me. Perhaps you've been more committed to growth and inner work and they haven't. Or perhaps, geography has created different realities, or maybe you live in different wealth realities. And I'm not saying for any moment that you shouldn't be friends with people who have all different realities in their life and come from all different walks of life. I think that's a precious thing. I'm more trying to tap into your authenticity and knowing about someone. Does this connection nourish me now? And if the answer is no, are there any ways that it could nourish me? Like maybe I notice we always do the thing that they want to do, right? Perhaps you have friends that really love to go for coffee, but you're not a coffee drinker. Perhaps you have friends that want to watch sport with you, but you're not that into it. And you can be in the give and take, but let's make sure there's give and take, right? So if you're constantly showing up for something that they like, maybe you can insert yourself and your desires more into the connection, right? So oftentimes what is needed for you to create more authentic connections with people is your own authenticity, right? And sometimes that means you dial back certain connections. And by the way, you don't have to make a decision now about the long term. You could just say in this cycle, right? 30, 90, 180 days, 1, 3, 6 months. What's my intention? Maybe I just put a bit more space in this connection. Maybe I back burner it because I'm practicing being more authentic in this way and this connection doesn't really support it. The more you have your authenticity, the more you might find you are refined in what you want in your life, but you also may have more flexibility, right? But when you're on the journey of really starting to dial in your own authenticity, it helps if the people around you, at least 1 or 2 of them, care about that and can support you in it. All right. So let's get back to this. What's the 4th thing that you can do to love yourself more? Well, the 4th thing you can do is go out of your way for yourself, right? So I'm not sure if this is a more British than American idiom, the notion that someone goes out of their way, right? So, growing up in my family, this was definitely a quality and still that is appreciated is, are people willing to put themselves out? Maybe that's the expression I'm looking for. Are people willing to put themselves out, right? Is someone always just kind of enamored of their own needs and desires, or are they actually willing to read the room, notice what other people notice other people nude? Can you notice when other people are nude? Because if you've not, I've got a great program, click the link. No. Can you notice other people's needs, and can you respond to them? Right? So are you willing to balance the self-other polarity in big code speak? Can you notice your needs and other people's needs and learn to move more fluidly along that spectrum? Most of us find it easier to do one than the other. Some people are inherently more self-centered. Some people are inherently more other-oriented. It might be true that evolutionarily we need different types of people, but in your own life and the integration, the integral stage of your development, you're likely to want to be able to move more consciously along that self-other polarity. So why is this important to self-love? Well, it's important to self-love because if you're someone listening right now and you're more other-centered, there's things that you can do for other people that you cannot do for yourself, right? So you might be able to cook a nice meal for someone else, but when it comes to yourself, you don't find that motivation, right? And it may always be true for you that you have a preference to cook for a we or other people, right? No problem with that. It's just, can you learn to dial it up for yourself from time to time? Can you learn, actually, it's important for me to prepare myself nutritious meals and I don't have to justify it for someone else, right? Maybe you're really good at cleaning your space when someone else visits, right? I know that's certainly been true. I don't know if I'm great at cleaning, but that's certainly been a motivation for me in the past. But also, it's really nice to have a clean space for yourself, right? So part of self-love in a simple way is think of the things that you love and do for other people. How able are you to do them for yourself, right? You might be willing to go really out of your way to make a particular journey, to pick someone up if they're coming into town. Would you go out of your way to get yourself a massage appointment or a therapy appointment or some nutritious food or supporting furniture, or you fill in the blanks of the things that in your life that you know make you feel attuned to by yourself? Or are those things so far down your list of priorities and needs that you almost never get to them? Or perhaps even worse or more, you're unconscious to your own needs, so you don't even notice. You don't even notice that you're kind of out to lunch routinely in the area of your life called, can I pay attention to myself? Can I create a loving foundation for myself? And am I willing to sacrifice some things for myself? Sacrifices might be in the form of money, right? Oh, actually, yeah, I am worth spending this money on because this is an important thing for me. I know I really get something from this. If you really get a lot from having a group dinner with people, then it might be worth you spending more to get that booking at that restaurant because it's just such a nourishing experience for you, right? So we're aiming for you to notice what really fills you up, what really nourishes you, and can you invest, time, talent, treasure in the things that matter to you? Can you invest your own hard-earned money, time, and energy in the things that would have you feel loved, right? If you feel very loved by getting an astrological reading, or if you feel very loved by going to see your favorite pop star, or if you feel very loved by having a PT appointment, how able are you to justify to yourself that those things matter and that they should come first, right? We're always likely to have too many things, particularly obviously in the increasing modern, postmodern, integral society with all the demands on our attention. We're always like to have too many things that we can pay attention to. So sometimes there's just a question of how far up your priorities can these things appear. All right, so in at number 5, thank you if you stayed this far. This one is probably the most important one because it's probably the one that you're least likely, I think, to hear elsewhere, because this is a distinction of higher level development. And if you've tracked this far in this conversation, my suspicion is that you may be interested in your higher level development. So number 5 is, are you able to drop your idealized self? Are you able to drop or relax your idealized self? So let me tell you what this is. A lot of us don't love ourselves or struggle to love ourselves because we have a projection about who we should be or who we want to be. Now, at a previous stage of development that we could call striver self, the idealized self is really important. And by the way, there's a ton of this stuff in the personal growth industry from people that have big YouTube channels, that they are striving to become the best version of themselves. And, I was even listening to a big internet commentator just yesterday, and he was saying, he really wanted to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? So he wanted to be the bodybuilder like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that kind of, ambition and discipline and going for itness, all the power to you. It's just a different thing than self-love, because quite often it involves modeling someone else, right? So it's not necessarily the authentic path for you. And quite often it involves a level of being tough and difficult to yourself that isn't what we would consider self-acceptance and self-love. Now, it's tricky because the fear is if you were too self-loving and self-accepting, you might lose all your drive and ambition, right? And there is some kind of partial truth in this, right? Because sometimes what propels people to great achievement is trauma and negative self-talk and basically telling yourself that you're not yet something until you've become this thing that you want to be. But it's often a never-ending cycle. And if you need to achieve something in order to love yourself, right? We might say that you have the opportunity to do it a different way, that you can pass more directly to loving yourself, that your love for yourself should not be conditional, right? If you have to be internet famous or a qualified lawyer or make $1 million or be in shape or get into a relationship in order to love yourself, what is that? Conditional love. What do we spend all our time talking about? Unconditional love. You want someone else to love you unconditionally. I don't actually know that that's even possible in a real relationship, right? Because there are conditions to our exchange, to what we value, how we want to show up together. We can get into that topic. But you can learn how to love yourself unconditionally, which means there's a kind of love and self-regard that even if you're having your most difficult day, you still go to bat for yourself. You're still in your corner. You can still look at how you talk to yourself. So one of the most important and underrated qualities in self-love is realizing that you are not this mind projection, right? You are not this sort of idealized, let me just give you a flavor of this. For some people, they've got to get up, they've got to do the workout, they've got to have the green shake, They've got to be getting personal bests. They've got to put themselves into therapy. They've got to do all these things in order to sort of be the best version of themselves. Whether that is fully true is actually a deep inquiry. I'm saying that some of the ideas that you've held about who you should be are getting in the way of who you actually are, right? If think of yourself more like you are, you're a sculpture. You are something that is being revealed. As we sculpt more of the sculpture comes to life, that you might be actually being revealed. This is a stage of development, meaning when you're in an authentic stage of development, which most people who follow this channel are, the things that were true for striver self are no longer necessarily true. So the striver self is much more, who do I want to be? Let me have a vision for my life. Let me go create it. Let me go after it, right? It's this sort of agentic striving self. It's what we call a by me reality. I create my reality. This can be super powerful. Here's the challenge. There's lots of truth in life that is not about your reality, right? So every time you're in the I create my reality, and I often see this when I look at certain commentators, I think, wow, you're going to have a lot of pain and suffering based upon the fact that there's lots that happens in your life that is not your reality, right? It's not just how you see the world. Of course, we're always seeing the world through our subjective experience, but there's lots to metabolize in life that isn't just how can you make it so, right? Life is going to have its way with you at certain times, whether it's how long do you live, how long are you here, whether you're incarnated in the first place, whether you got to adulthood. Right? I had older brother I never got to meet, who died at the age of 2.5, right? That's part of the suffering and reality of life, right? So yes, bring your agency, but self-love will also say, can you love yourself now? Not when I've achieved this thing in the future, or then the next big goal or the next goal. How can I love myself and accept myself for who I am? I can still have big ideas about where I'm going, but let me be a little bit more judicious about the visions that I create for myself, and let me wonder if they're really me, right? Sometimes people strive in a certain direction, and then they realize this wasn't even what I wanted to do, right? What I actually wanted was validation. I was watching a podcast the other day of Thierry Henry. If you followed soccer, you might know who that is. He was arguably the best striker in the English Premier League. At certain points in the 90s, played for Arsenal, top goal scorer, won all the awards. Hugely decorated soccer player, masterful, right? And he's talking about how he never received any love, that he didn't even really choose to be a footballer. His dad chose for him to be a footballer. That was all he was created to be. But he's an authentic being that has more expression than just his talent in soccer. This is true of a lot of elite sports people, that the psychology that underpins it is somewhere between self-critical and self-abusive. Now, some people might say, well, that's the price you pay. You want to be an elite cyclist, you got to, push that pain barrier. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk shite to myself all the way to becoming, the best I can be, a world champion. You have that choice. I'm just saying, when your authentic development comes more online, that choice will occur to you differently. And you might care more about being self-loving than you do about being self-critical and self-striving in the same way. You can love yourself and still put in a 16-hour day of work and be disciplined. It's not coming from a you piece of SHIT. It's coming from a, hey, this is something you care about, so let's go to bat on it today. Let's work hard today. But I'm with you and I've got you. And my love for you isn't dependent upon whether you put in a big day's work or whether you achieve the goal. I'm going to love you all the way along the journey. So those are 5 deep and meaningful things that you can do to love yourself more. If you've liked what I'm about, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I release videos about who you can be authentically, how to cultivate the more real you. This channel is about higher level development, individually and collectively. So if you want stuff on YouTube that's real, this is a good place to pick it up. This isn't tricks and gimmicks. This is real development for real people. And if you are interested, watch the next video here, because it will give you a good insight into the other ways that I can support you on this channel. As always, I'm Jack. Thank you so much for being here.